The question is that this bill be now read a second time. The member for Wills.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Parliamentary scrutiny is absolutely vital in ensuring the best decision-making, the most efficient and prudent use of taxpayer funds, along with a more informed parliament and, by extension through us in this place, a more informed public, because that's part of our responsibility. Now, the Albanese government, Labor government, is committed to the continual improvement of our national security laws, and I can attest to that, having spent the last 2 years as the chair of the Parliamentary Joint Intelligence and Security Committee, to ensure our agencies, law enforcement agencies, security agencies and intelligence agencies, are best equipped to continue their work to keep Australians safe and to protect our way of life. The new Parliamentary Joint Committee on Defence, the PJCD, established by this bill, will inject greater parliamentary transparency, accountability and oversight into the defence portfolio, in line with the Albanese government's commitment to transparency and accountability. It is necessary, Deputy Speaker, to ensure that Parliament can also examine the defence projects and Australia's defence strategy in greater detail and, of course, in a classified setting where required, with the appropriate safeguards in place. Now, the Albanese Labor government takes these duties very seriously. We've heard from previous speakers, like the member for Solomon, who spoke eloquently around the point of bipartisanship and the importance for a consensus around what are critically important national security issues for this nation. Let me just expand on this approach for a moment, Deputy Speaker. What we mean by that is not just agreeing on everything all the time, because there is a contest of ideas. There are differences of views right across this place and in the other place, even within parties as well. What we mean by a bipartisan approach is checking the partisan politics at the door when it comes to the work that we do, for example, in the Intelligence and Security Committee, and I would hope in the the Joint Defence Committee. Park the partisan politics at the door and, in good faith, seek to try and reach a consensus after a vigorous debate and analysis and engagement, reach a consensus on what we consider to be important and critically important for the national interest in and around our national security. That is a really important approach. It means not playing politics with such important issues, but in a genuine, good faith effort, seeking to find the best possible set of recommendations, the best analysis, the best understanding of what is required for the government to put in place. Now, this approach is more crucial than ever, particularly in the challenging, complex strategic environment, the national security environment that we find ourselves in currently. The establishment of the PJCD implements a recommendation of the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade's inquiry into international and conflict decision-making, following a referral from the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence as well. That inquiry was initiated to deliver a commitment in the Australian Labor Party's national platform. So the PJCD is modelled, as we've heard, on the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, the PJCIS, and will supersede and enhance the defence-related functions currently undertaken by the Joint Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade. Now, as I mentioned, as chair of the PJCIS, I am very cognisant of the important role that the PJCIS has always played in doing the necessary work, the extremely rigorous, methodical work, and bipartisan where necessary, but certainly the work done in an atmosphere conducive to the national interest, coming first and foremost, rather than partisan or temporary political gains. Reaching consensus where it is possible in the national interest. So that has meant, Deputy Speaker, that the membership is by appointment, and the structure of the PJCIS has been agreed upon. And the Intelligence Security Committee, which the PJCD is modelled on, vigorously scrutinises bills and debates those bills, those national security bills, in a classified setting, mainly, and comes to agreed positions and recommendations. And then we write up, and most usually it's a joint report that is bipartisan from all members, no matter what side of politics they are on. And so the PJCD is modelled on this PGCIS, structurally, but also I think in the context of the manner in which it goes about, or should go about, doing the very, very critical and important national security work that it will be tasked with doing. And that is just as important as the elements in the bill, the structural elements, the foundational setup of the PJCD. It is that understanding of the critical nature of the work that is being undertaken and the importance of members of that committee undertaking that work in good faith, regardless of where we are in the political, what side we are on politics. So, in a sense, Deputy Speaker, I'm making a case for not playing politics with very important matters, especially the matters that really pertain to the national security and the security of Australians. Now, those opposite me would know that this type of good faith arrangement, this type of effort, this bipartisanship when it's possible, in the PJCIS makes us stronger and safer as a nation. And as with the PJCIS, which I chair, the Prime Minister, in consultation with the Leader of the Opposition, appoints the members of the committee and will do so for the PJCD. And there will be a majority of government members and then non-government members to make up the rest from both houses of parliament. Those arrangements, the arrangements for information handling, are closely modelled on the PJCIS, and the committee proceedings, as I said, will be conducted in private and appropriately secure settings, unless, of course, the Minister has authorised public hearings to look at certain bills. And this would be with the exception of the committee's consideration of the annual reports of defence agencies. Now, that is to ensure that sensitive information can be adequately assessed and analysed by committee members. Unfortunately, Deputy Speaker, we still see the coalition, those opposite, not being able to resist the temptation to play politics with this very, very important establishment of this very, very important Defence Committee. And playing politics with Australia's national security. While we are focused squarely on keeping Australians safe, squarely on our national security, squarely on our national interest, they have decided to oppose this bill. And I would say to those opposite, because I've seen this story before, they ran this argument with respect to the PJCIS increasing its numbers. The Prime Minister already has the power to appoint any member of Parliament to the PJCIS, and that is done in consultation with the Leader of the Opposition under the Intelligence Services Act. And as I said, the PJCD will be modelled on the PGCIS. That is a long-standing process, and it will be no different for the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Defence. That process will be the same. And it's quite galling, Deputy Speaker, because previous inquiries have recommended the establishment of a statutory committee on defence. We've seen that in this place. The Defence Subcommittee of the Joint Standing Committee recommended in 2018 the creation of a similar joint statutory committee. And when the former government, the Morrison government, the coalition, responded to this in 2019, they actually disagreed with the recommendation, saying there's already enough substantial parliamentary oversight measures in place for the Department of Defence. Okay, so they knocked it back then in 2019 on that inquiry's recommendation. And when they were in government, they rejected the establishment of the PJCD, and it's a committee that will allow for more scrutiny. So they're knocking back the need for more scrutiny. And when they were in government, they dodged accountability, they reduced transparency, they rejected scrutiny, clearly from their own statements. Deputy Speaker, those opposite me grandstanded, used fear-mongering about national security and defence. They do it all the time, but then they refuse to accept the recommendations that would actually improve both, provide transparency and accountability. And now they're back in opposition, Deputy Speaker. There's still this aversion to greater scrutiny by this place, by the Parliament. And I don't understand it, except for the politics. Again, playing politics with this, where the former government was unwilling to take this up This government, the Albanese Labor government, is actually acting on those recommendations, the long-standing recommendations, and establishing this Defence Committee. I would say that the position of the opposition, they'd have to explain it for themselves. It is not just disappointing, but I think it's frankly irresponsible. Given the current strategic circumstances that we face, there is a critical need for a committee such as the PJCD, which can provide effective parliamentary scrutiny of defence in a classified environment. Everyone agrees upon that. Everyone. And has agreed upon that. And then at the 11th hour, they have decided to say no. And we've been clear from the beginning as a government that this committee recommended it be modelled on the PJCIS, and that's long enjoyed bipartisan support. And it's particularly disappointing because, as I said, everyone's agreed it. Even those opposite have agreed on it. The Shadow Minister for Defence, the member for Canning, said in March of this year, and I quote, "I think that would be a really important development for a lot of parliamentarians who care about our troops and want to see the best for them." End quote. That was in relation to the establishment of this Defence Committee. As far back as 2020, the Shadow Minister for Defence wrote an opinion piece where he called for a joint Defence Committee and said, and I quote, "Parliamentary scrutiny of defence is broken and needs fixing. If we are serious about increased accountability and transparency, then we need proper parliamentary scrutiny of the Department of Defence and the Australian Defence Force." End quote. That's the Shadow Minister for Defence. I wonder what happened in their party room last week. Did all of those statements just suddenly get forgotten? And then they decided, well, hold on, we don't want more scrutiny, we've changed our mind. They said this when they said it when they were in government, they said it when they were in opposition, and now at the 11th hour, when we're about to put forward the bill, they oppose it. Now, Deputy Speaker, the PJCD will be responsible for reviewing, monitoring and reporting on the administration and the operations of all Australian defence agencies, including the ADF, the Department of Defence and the Department of Veterans Affairs. All of the intelligence organisations, the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the Geospatial Intelligence Organisation and the Australian Signals Directorate will remain subject to oversight by the PJCIS. There's going to be a broad range of functions that have been established by this bill that act as a standing term of reference for the PJCD and provide for greater oversight, transparency and accountability in those significant areas within the defence portfolio. Reviewing admin and expenditure, reviewing the defence agencies including their annual reports, considering white papers, reviews and other policy documents, strategies, planning, contingencies, scrutinising Australia's defence capability, development, acquisitions and sustainment, considering matters related to personnel and veterans affairs, examining and being appraised of war or warlike operations, including ongoing conflicts, monitoring the involvement of Australian defence agencies in significant non-conflict operations domestically and internationally, reviewing the implementation of the government's response and monitoring it for the findings of any Royal Commission inquiring into matters relating to the defence of Australia or any agency, considering the operation, resources and performance of the Inspector-General of Defence Force. Deputy Speaker, these are critically important tasks that need to be taken up, and those opposite are delaying this and blocking this bill. As Australians, we are fortunate to have a level of peace, security and stability that countless others are not able to appreciate around the world. And it can be often easy to take this stability and this security that we enjoy for granted, to just think it's just this permanent fixture of Australian life. But the reality is that upholding and protecting that standard of security requires a constant level of vigilance. And, Deputy Speaker, this bill and the creation of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Defence is just one element, and a very crucial element, of the Albanese Labor government's national security and transparency agenda to put forward those elements of vigilance, to do our job. And the government is committed to continuously updating our systems and our security infrastructure to preempt and overcome challenges to keep Australians safe and keep Australia's safe and our national interests upheld. That is my task, I know, as the chair of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, and I take that job especially seriously as I know the members do of my committee. And I know that the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Defence will take this important responsibility, this sacrosanct responsibility, just as seriously. And I urge the opposition, I urge them to stop playing politics with this bill and to support it as they have in the past so that we can pass it through this place.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time.